Yes, do you feel like being the first one?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much for the nice introduction, and thanks to all of you for being here this afternoon. And yeah, also thanks again for actually agreeing to do this 2 years ago. It was a pleasure doing this, and you of course took away all the anecdotes that I wanted to share with you. So now I have to restart the whole thing. No, but that's really pressing on my mind, and which is actually something that has been pressing on my mind since I can remember, and it's probably pressing on a lot of people's mind. Is just simply the question of how this world functions and why people do what they do. And the curiosity behind this is probably what keeps a lot of people running. Can everybody hear me?
Other people maybe like to sit here.
Yeah, what makes people do what they do around the world in regards to different cultures, different religions, different geographical backgrounds, and why did we get to the point in civilization that we are at the moment, and thinking about this, or meditating over these kind of questions. I guess also what brought me to do what I'm doing, working as a curator, really trying to investigate these questions. And in a way, I think that behind everyone who we asked during the World Question Center Reloaded is probably one particular question that drives these people to do what they do. And I'm not sure necessarily if that was a question they were posing us, because often these kind of questions are more general, to think about, okay, how did we get here and why are people doing what they do? And it's not even so much the desire to understand or trying to understand what's going to happen in the future because we have learned something from the past. It's just really more trying to dismantle the current situation and look behind it. And in a way, of course, there's also this absurdity that even if you do it, you're not going to find an answer. So it's kind of like a question to which we probably will never find any answer. So when I say that this is somehow something that relates to what I'm doing as a curator, I just thought that I'm going to quickly present one exhibition that I've done recently, something that I did outside of the ICA actually, that maybe somehow relates to it and that explains a little bit further what I've been trying to tell you and how this kind of particular question is driving me in my work as a curator. I was actually living in LA, and I worked there for an institution called Los Angeles Contemporary Exhibitions that invited me specifically to curate a show there in Los Angeles, following another show that I did there a couple of years before. And one of the ways I always approach different scenarios, and this is like something that's, I just think, probably quite crucial to understand how you work as a curator, particularly when you work as an independent curator, that you kind of like invited to different contexts and you are asked to relate to them in one way or the other to, of course, try to create meaningful exhibitions for these kind of contexts. And it's, of course, rather difficult to jump from one place to the other, from one particular situation to the other without actually knowing the histories of these places, the current realities of those places. And of course I knew a little bit more about Los Angeles when I started to do this project. And my question, of course, was, I'm kind of like confronted with all these old cliches of Los Angeles. I mean, this is just like a couple of cliches that you, of course, associate with them, like, high-rise buildings or Hollywood, or again, Hollywood and the stars on Hollywood Boulevard with all these famous movie stars, entertainers and musicians, or of course this whole beach culture, surf culture. Here again, Santa Monica, or the endless highways that you associate with Los Angeles. Or of course the Los Angeles Lakers. And another question that doesn't let me sleep, where is the lake in Los Angeles? Why are they called Lakers? Or, drive-through culture, where you can get your Big Mac In-N-Out burger, or drive through your bank or post office or so on. So all these kind of like old cliches of Los Angeles.
I believe they call the water reservoir up to Hollywood Hill, the lake, which was built by Japanese about 10 years ago.
Finally, I can rest it now. So, now coming to this exhibition that I wanted to talk about, which is, was called A Walk to Remember. So coming from Europe, or having lived most of my life in Europe, the culture where walking is actually, very common thing, particularly when you think about a city like Utrecht or Amsterdam or the situation here in the Netherlands. You come to Los Angeles, where this idea of walking is clearly a thing of the past, and you're sort of like thrown into this sort of postmodern urban condition. And I was kind of always fascinated by the fact that everything you kind of see and view in Los Angeles, you always do from the perspective of being in a car. You drive through it. And, for example, advertisement billboards, whether it's for films or like new movie releases or for any kind of thing, they're always sort of like geared towards people in cars. And it's also a class thing in a way, where you suddenly realize that people who are actually driving, of course, are middle class or upper middle class, and most of the people who are actually walking, or in that case, taking the bus. I mean, taking the bus is basically, I guess, like walking in terms of class differences in Los Angeles. Taking the bus and are probably, as you can see, the underprivileged people with low income. And when I thought about Los Angeles contemporary exhibitions, I of course also saw that the people who come to see the exhibitions there are privileged people of the middle classes and not necessarily the people who walk. So it was this idea to also think, how can we make those people who always drive cars, how can we make those people walk? And me coming from Europe, bringing something over that is very significant for us over to Los Angeles, that sort of challenged the mode of mobility, the mode of walking around. So I created this idea where I asked 12 artists from Los Angeles, 12 artists who have born there, who live there, who have worked most of their life in Los Angeles, to conceive of walks through a particular part of the city that has a particular significance either to their biography or a particular significance to what they do as an artist in their work, and guide a group of people through that neighborhood and give them a tour. At the same time, I was quite curious about the treatment of the galleries and trying to sort of like bridge this gap between what happens inside the gallery space and what happens outside the gallery space. So the idea was that we would have this kind of scenario that you see here now on the screen inside the galleries. And it's kind of like creating a particular form of scenario or a kind of stage, almost like a different form of representation of what happens outside. It's artistic curatorial representation. And the colors here are actually chosen from the colors of the flag of Los Angeles, where the green is representing prosperity and the green hills of California and the endless blue sky. And we also had the golden letters here, which were indicating each artist's name, and underneath you see the maps. They were in gold, which then again goes back to this time of the gold rush to California, which was like California as a promised land. So we had these maps, and the audience could come to see the gallery space as it was here, and then they got a little booklet where the walks were described and where the artists described their intentions of why they wanted to go to a particular place. Here's one of John Baldessari, for example, that is a detail of what you just saw. And Baldessari, in a very conceptual manner, had a very straightforward, very clear, very minimal agenda behind his work. He was just saying, okay, the audience is walking with me from one studio to the other studio. He has two studios. One is in Venice Beach and the other is in Santa Monica, about a walk of 15 minutes. And along that way, they are asked to photograph every street sign and every traffic light that they see. So this is the second part of the whole exhibition. The audience, they all got a disposable camera and were asked to photograph those walks, giving the visitors of the gallery their impressions of those walks. So you had this sort of like next level within this exhibition where the audience was actually invited to participate by giving us their view of what they just saw, their interpretation of the artwork, which was a walk, or maybe the photographs. And I'm going to show you some of those installations later of the photographs. This is another walk that is by Meg Cranston, who brought the audience to the only Native American boarding school that exists, and she connected two different parts of Los Angeles with this walk. One is Bunker Hill, which is in downtown Los Angeles, where until 60 years ago there was a large population of Native Americans still living, and brought then the audience or the visitors over to Riverside, to this boarding school where there were particular festivities going on during that particular weekend. And this is the map of Eric Wesley, who brought the audience to Griffith Park. And here is an installation shot of how it looked actually then with the pictures. So little by little, I think we did each walk over the period of the 3 months 4 times. So little by little the exhibition was growing and changing by including those photographs of the audience, and you could get a sense of what the audience was actually seeing. Little by little it would grow and change, and I think we had a maximum of about 8 people on each walk, and you had to pre-sign if you wanted to go on one of the walks. Here's another installation shot. Here's actually the one of Balasari, and we have a detail of that one as well. This is a detail shot of the photographs that the audience took from the walk of Ruben Ortiz Torres. And what Ruben does is kind of looking for particular curiosities within Los Angeles subculture that relate to Mexican or Chicano culture in the city. And he brought the audience to East LA, to this muffler shop, where there is this person that you see there, this guy running this muffler shop, and he has this amazing cabinet of curiosities. It's kind of like a museum of curiosities on absurd things that he has found, and he claims to have about 1 million different items in there. And I guess it's not far off that. Unfortunately, you don't really see a shot of the collection itself. Maybe when you look at this wall here, this is like a little detail of this museum.
It's typical LA. Everybody claims to have at least 1 million.
Yeah, anything 1 million. 1 million miles per hour. This was the work of Eric Wesley in the park. No, actually this was Jennifer Bornstein. And this is the one of John Balasari, where people were photographing the street signs and also these dogs here. Oops, my daughter. Next picture, come on. Oops, I don't know why it's not moving. Okay, this is like for the London show, for the Los Angeles show. Yeah, that's basically it so far.
You as a curator of the World Question Center Reloaded, what did that project mean in your work as a curator?
This exhibition functions on many different levels, and that's also why I kind of choose to talk about it here. And it has a lot to do with like my particular work as a curator, and how maybe this question that I was posing before, and trying to understand how the world functions and why people do what they do and how they are driven by what they are driven. I think maybe there are different forms of curating in that way, where you pose yourself an existential question like that, and then you go with it and you kind of feel an existential relationship to what they do, which is probably like very close to also the sort of like creative form that an artist has behind his work. And I had a conversation with Tino actually about this exhibition recently, and we were really sort of like also talking very much about the relationship between the artist and the curator. And I think something that is very similar to the World Question Center is again this idea of like providing a particular frame which you control as a curator quite strongly, but within that frame there's a lot of possibilities for creativity of other people, whether it's the artists, here they come up with the works, or it's the audience that responds with the photographs, or in our case, us asking a group of people to nominate or to name a person that they consider a brilliant mind, and then us phoning those people again and then asking them to pose us a question on which we then can reflect or meditate and so on. So in a way, it is a framework that takes into consideration the situation there in Los Angeles and the particularities, and maybe sometimes also in a humorous way, but on the other hand, of course, it's also a really good example of how I think you deal with these kind of questions on an existential level, where these kind of things become more than just a simple form of administration or organization, but relate very much to your own desires and your obsessions or things that don't let you sleep at night.
You chose to present a work of yours, curated project that you didn't realize at home, so to speak, not in your own institution. World Question Center is another one that you did somewhere else, not at ICA, although I understand it was before you started to work there as a director of exhibitions. Now my question, something that's on my mind, my question is, do you think your work at ICA is different because of the permanence of kind of engagement with your own environment and London as a city and Great Britain, etc.? Is it different than this kind of temporary, as they call it in the Netherlands, manifestation, somewhere else? Do you feel there's less responsibility in that work, or?
No, there's the same form of responsibility in every work. It's different and it's the same. Because I approach, of course, the overall program of the institution in a similar way, and I think about the program in a similar way, and I think about all the different exhibitions in a similar way. So I make a proposition for your context, where you started with a question for the overall show, and then my response was to come up with a project that was putting questions in the center of all of it. And in a similar way, it happens in Los Angeles, or any context you're invited to. You try to respond to what is given, and try to take this as a challenge and as a possibility. And I think, of course, when you're in London, where I live now, I get to know the city much better, and I get to know the context much better, so I can react much better, and then can also act, or formulate some form of variety. I can try to, react to it always in a different way, show by show, and sometimes I take it quite a lot into consideration when I think about doing a show that takes London as a city and its context, its history and its reality into consideration. Sometimes I think about it in a different way, where the institution maybe in its history becomes a source for what we're gonna do, or an artist. So it sort of like wanders around, but it's the same form of responsibility and the very same approach.
Well, I may have a question. You mentioned at the very beginning of your speech that you consider yourself an independent or freelance curator. Now, having the job at the ICA in London, you are institutionalized. Is that correct?
No, I'm not an institutionalized curator. I'm an institutional curator. Well, that's the difference.
Okay.
And I still do a lot of work outside the institution. And of course, the term independent or freelance, it's of course sort of like misleading. Independent curator, of course you're dependent on a lot of things, even if you work independently. I think it just suggests that you are not affiliated permanently with an institution. Yeah. What I mean to say is, like, I operate outside independently from the ICA as well, and do shows that are not connected with the institution necessarily.
Jens, before we offer the floor to Ulay, would you want to return a question to him? Do you have a question for Ulay?
I have a question, yes.
Oh my God. Ulay. Go for it.
You first.
No, you said you had a question for me, so I was off the hook.
Well, if you get a good offer made, would you mind becoming institutionalized?
What would that mean?
Well, become the director of the New Tate.
Yeah, well, maybe then I would still continue to do things outside, or do you think I wouldn't be able to?
If you're allowed to. If you do better things outside, you will have a trouble.
Oh, what is...
One comment to the...
Take a mic.
I mean, I think that I would like to make one comment also to that project, maybe following up what you were saying, and I think that I think that what you have in your project, Dreaming a Better World in six parts, is there's a very utopian blend in it, no? And I think that what you are asking Jens is in a way, which he maybe answered on a very abstract level. What does this particular project, from the many projects he's doing, have to do with maybe such a utopian outlook or something? And I was thinking, I mean, I didn't see this project obviously live, I didn't do one of the walks, but I think that what's from my interests, what strikes me in this project is that it's a kind of revisiting of something which has fascinated maybe especially artists, which is the walk. Now, if you think of the surrealist walk, the situationist derive, and this maybe there's a certain idea of the world as a, maybe even as a collection, or the world as an exhibition which you can experience by walking, and also maybe a certain form of a notion we don't like today, but a certain form of authenticity, no? which is always there in the walk, and bringing that to a place which Jens said at one moment, walking seems like something from the past. Obviously, to reinsert something maybe authentic into the kind of machine of artificialization, Los Angeles, seems for me to take a particular political position. Now, if that's a correct one or a good one or not, I don't know. But I think that's what, I mean, from a distance, what I see in this project is very much this highlighting of the walk. Apart from the fact that I think John Baldessari really managed
his work.
managed to make it look like his work, which is amazing.
But you know, you're totally right. I agree with you about, you know, putting the accent on walking.
Yeah, also you did a walk, no?
Well, I'm still a great walker, and you picked the most impossible place to walk, which is LA. And I tell you, I was fined in 1989 or 90, I was fined walking in Beverly Hills. You are not supposed to walk in Beverly Hills. They have also no sidewalks. You are suspicious. So I was stopped by a police patrol and they fined me. I explained that I'm a walker, who I am, what I did there, and I just love walking. Well, they didn't fine me, but they got me in the car and brought me to Mulberry. How is it called? Mulgrave Street, North Hollywood. But it is the most impossible place to walk on Earth, and I agree. I would have liked to see, to re-experience more about walking in an impossible place to walk.
But it's true what you said, that you know, this idea of walking, of course, goes to make artists work.
Yeah, also
and
this Chinese, I don't know if
the Chinese walk with Marina.
The Chinese walk.
No, walk.
That one, yeah.
No, but the surrealist walk, the situationist walks, as you said, and things that would go clearly back to this idea of the
walks.
Richard Long and the,
we all walk.
Yeah.
And what I mean is that there's a certain...
No, it goes back to Benjamin, of course, and the idea of the flaneur, you know, in the early 20th century, and how you sort of like then view the city, and I think it's like very much about this idea of viewing the city through the eyes of artists, you know. And I think that's kind of like very central to this idea.
Looks like a great show.
I was going to say something, but it was not so important. I mean, I just think that the walk is something which has been very much kind of politically and ideologically loaded throughout different generations of artists. I just wanted to...
What you said about authenticity was interesting as well. The idea that actually the authenticity can exist as much in the exhibition space as it can exist outside. I mean, this was a little bit, of course, also the case in trying to put these two things into relationship, the gallery space and the outside, the cityscape of Los Angeles.
But then I'm surprised that you give the audience... I'm surprised that the artists gave the people walking a task, and by that keeping them under control, so they could only see what the artist wanted them to see. I don't see that as authentic. Whatever. Yeah.
Authentic.
Well, I think, well, Maria, we may have to define what authenticity is meant by it.
By the way,
if you think about walking, it's as authentic as walking, isn't it?
But
If you only think about walking, wouldn't that be as authentic than walking itself, physically?
I don't want to go into a discussion of, I mean, I mentioned...
Why don't you sit at the mic, then I have an easier task. And I have a question waiting in the audience, and Jens is having a question for Ulla, huh? If I remember well. After Tino, there's Annie Fletcher who wants to ask a question.
No, I mean, this was just a way of rhetorics where I was saying there's always this element of, there's a certain ideology in this kind of artist view on walking, and maybe there's also a bit of an authentic idea about it, but I just wanted to mention that it was not an important topic. I don't think it's really worth going into this discussion, to be honest. But on the other hand, you could say, well, I would find it a pity, but personally, but on the other hand, you could say the moment they get the camera, of course, there's a kind of, again, inauthentic, whatever postmodern moment included in this show, A Walk to Remember.
I guess I didn't really want to ask a question, but more make a comment a little bit about what I thought was so special about a certain focus of the World Questions Centre, and comes out here again is this idea of participation. I think this idea of creating a very kind of focused sphere in which, as Jens said, there's an enormous enrichment by the others, by those who may happen to both be wrong or here visit the gallery. So just wondering, yeah, is that also a link that you kind of see this notion of a kind of possibility created by participation?
Yeah, maybe in the end it also, of course, talks about authorship and who's actually really directing here the authorship, or who is writing the story. Is it the artist? Is it the curator? Is it the participants that are involved? Are they all just, you know, working with symbols and codes that are sort of like pushed to one side and the other and then rearranged to create something new? And this is maybe also a little bit, of course, a question in relation to all kinds of works and exhibitions that go into this sphere that we seem to now all call relational aesthetics.
We don't call that, don't say that.
I guess it's just like a term that lots of people understand.
I don't know, and I haven't heard anybody since you just said it for the last 2 years. I think I've been in the right places.
Jens, do you want to take up the challenge and pose a question to Ulla, or you pass?
Well, what have you been up to?
Very fine question.
Thank you for posing the question, but you see, since we are taking part in the World Question Center, I assume that we are not supposed to answer questions, but only to pose questions.